Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And the Arena World Championship Cup #1 just concluded for Europe and North America. It was an absolute blast. I absolutely enjoyed being involved with it, adding the play-by-play commentary for it. It had a ton of surprises, a lot of unexpected teams, had a lot of deep runs in it, and it made it fantastic. And with the conclusion of Cup #1 in today's video, I basically wanted to do kind of just like a PvP update. Where is everything sitting in PvP? We've had a few weeks now of ladder and leaderboard play. We've now had our first tournament event, and I just wanted to go over things like activity. I wanted to go over spec representation and over some of my own thoughts on possibly what could be done to help improve the situation so that things continue to remain as healthy as they currently seem. So the first thing that I wanted to review, obviously, was activity. This is what makes the game feel alive. Now, I can tell you from Battleground Blitz perspective that I am very happy with Battleground Blitz, not only just from gameplay, but also from a queue time perspective. So if you're somebody who wants to just jump in and play a solo queue mode of the game, you don't have a lot of time to organize people, Battleground Blitz absolutely delivers on that. I have no issues whatsoever with it. The MMR seems to be a little bit random in some sense, like highly skilled players or some players who get lucky with a win streak are able to climb to ridiculously high ratings, while there is other players who may get caught in the pit of MMR where it feels like you can't get out. Now, one of the best recommendations that I've seen so far for the pit is basically to duo queue your way out of that, which is again great for the mode to have, so you can pick up a healer, jump into it, and I have seen a lot of players seeing more success with that. Myself personally, I've only been solo queuing because I think for the majority of players that's going to be their experience, and I wanted to see like how possible is it to deal with these situations. And I've had characters that fall into the pit and I've been able to kind of crawl my way out of it, but it does take quite a long time. So if you're in that boat and you feel like your rating is kind of stagnating in Battleground Blitz, you kind of just have to keep queuing. You have to queue through it. Most important things for getting through the pit is just knowing where does your class get the most amount of value on the map. Are you a team fight oriented class? Are you a base stealing class? Are you a 1v1 type of class? You really want to figure out where you get the most amount of value. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like a video covering that more in detail, every role and maybe every spec and what exactly where they should be situated on the map in order to see the most amount of success, because I definitely think it's still possible. But with Battleground Blitz, we can see in the last 72 hours that basically there were about 5,000 total Blitz games. In the last 48 hours, as soon as this decides to load, we'll be able to see exactly how many that is as well. About 3,500 games played, which, given the fact that the queues are pretty much instant, it's instant to 5 minutes, probably depending on the rating range there and depending on the role a bit, but I think that's a fairly healthy margin. I think if anything, it's just the queue times and the gameplay that is helping a lot with this game mode. I would still personally like to see some class tuning adjustments. I think you'll see it if we scroll down like towards the top end of the the charts here as the players push into the top. You see a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of green and there's a lot of yellow with a couple of purples. A fire mage coming up here at 2,800. Now, fire mage has pretty low representation, so seeing a fire mage this high up on the ladder is actually very impressive, because not basically nobody is playing that. I would personally like to see some changes to flag carrier debuffs. I think some classes don't need the movement speed boost, because currently right now if you pick up the flag you get like a stamina increase if you're a DPS or a healer and a movement speed increase. Some classes don't really need the movement speed increase, and I don't know if it's possible to apply specific movement speed adjustments depending on the class. Something like a Mistweaver or a Druid as a flag carrier or even a Preservation Evoker, they don't really need that movement increase in order to carry the flag across the map, and it's causing a massive skew as far as that is concerned. Now, Rogue specifically, it seems like there's an unfair line between being able to use tools like Cloak of Shadows to immune magic attacks while clicking a base and turning it over, versus a paladin that can't use magic blessing of protection, which makes them immune to spells. They can't click the same base when they're effectively the same ability. So I think updating which abilities, you know, you can capture a base while they are currently active and which ones that you can't would help alleviate a bit of this. Obviously, Rogue having access to things like Kidney Shot and Gouge and Blind and a lot of these instant CCs that they can apply to a player and then take a base is one of the reasons we're seeing the representation be so high. I'm not 100% sure what can really be done about that. The only thing is I just don't really like the inconsistencies between which defensive cooldowns can be used while capturing a base or which defensive cooldowns can be used while carrying a flag. And Cloak of Shadows is one of those that stands out. I think Paladins should be able to use the Blessing of Protection and then click the flag. That might actually help them be the counter to Rogue. Because rogues don't really have, I don't think they do at least, have ways to attack through Blessing of Protection. So if a Ret runs up on a rogue, they can kind of be the counter and maybe use Paladins as like a type of a counter thing for rogues and the representation that's seeing them so high at the moment, because you don't really want to like impact the baseline kit of Rogue too much with that. But even despite that, I think that the gameplay is still really fun for a large majority of specs. And the fast queues are making it feel really great. Now, Solo Shuffle Arena, we can see in the last 72 hours, you can look at the activity for this, which I think is going to come as a bit of a surprise because I think the number is actually very high. There's been 103,000 total shuffle rounds played and 17,000 lobbies, right? So 6 rounds per lobby, so 103,000 rounds. That's 103,000 rounds of Arena in the last 72 hours. That is quite high. Now, the problem with Solo Shuffle is that unlike in RBGs, when we see the highest rated players are like 2,900, I think. Let's just say 2,800 because I already forgot what the number was. In Solo Shuffle, we're seeing players start to cusp at like 2,300, even despite this high level of participation, which usually determines that ratings will end up being very high. And you would expect something like maybe 2,700 as the top end for Solo Shuffle. But most players are not even getting Legend at this time. It's very difficult. So if you feel like you're playing at a lower rating than you normally do, don't beat yourself up. Now, this is something that does naturally fix itself. I think this number is already higher at 2,300. Usually week to week, MMR gets increased, but it does feel like it's been throttled back pretty significantly in Shuffle. And this was an adaptation that was made in Dragonflight. And I feel like it's just all about finding the sweet spot, because if you give too much MMR all at once, people are 3,600 rating on the first week, and then they have nowhere to go from there, which doesn't feel good. But then if you have it really low on the low end, then you feel like you get stuck at 1,600 and you can't really get to that next transmog that you're trying to go after, or you feel like it's not even possible to get to that next transmog. So this is a very difficult balancing beam that needs to be walked, and I think it's just a little bit too far on the low end. So I don't know if this is like a super complex thing to change in the back end, and maybe it's not even something that's possible to do while the season is live. But I think just a little bit of a tweak, a little bit of a bump up would definitely go a long way as far as driving participation for it. But I do think it is something that is going to kind of self-correct. While it is difficult right now, likely in a week or in 2 weeks from now, it will improve. I really enjoy the alt accessibility as well of this expansion. I think it's providing a lot of longevity, whether it's in PvE or PvP. If you play a class, you get to a certain goal on it, or maybe you're starting to get bored of it, the ability to mail your honor to your alt. You can collect some conquest tokens if you're playing a healer in Solo Shuffle. This is allowing players to play a ton of different specs whenever they want. And with the queue times being so fast in Blitz, you can just basically dabble in anything that you really want at any time. And I think that's really good. And considering this is the start of the expansion where balance is typically not the best, right? Like I've played pretty much every expansion. And at the launch, the balance is usually not good. I'd say that this is likely the best balance the game has ever had. There's a couple of archetypes, some healers, but there's at least more than one melee, more than one ranged, and more than one healer, right? Usually that ends up being the case. And then in the AWC, for example, we only see one combination of those succeeding, which wasn't the case in the tournament for this weekend. We did see quite a bit of variety and interchangeability. I think bringing up some of the weaker performers is likely the direction that should be done at this point, seeing the tournament results. And I think that we can look at that specifically if I can figure out how to look at the stats for this. So if we look at something like Solo Shuffle stats, we look at 2,100 plus, we can see that there's still a lot of representation of Warlock, Marksmanship Hunter. We saw that, but we also saw weaknesses for these classes as well in the tournament, but maybe the tune is a little bit high. I still think focusing towards the bottom end and bringing the bottom up is likely going to be better. Resto Shaman, I've been playing it myself, has felt particularly awful, but now I'm not playing Totemic Shaman, and this comes into another whole kind of balancing act of whether or not, like, How do you buff Farseer Shaman without buffing Totemic? Because I need to try Totemic, honestly, before I give it like a full review. Discipline Priest, on the other hand, I do think can be brought down pretty simply by targeting the hero talent abilities. I think any of the passives in the Oracle tree that increase Power Word Shield's absorption effect could likely get tuned a bit down, but you got to be really careful with it, because I do think there's like a breaking point on it where like Disc doesn't have the best mobility, and you bring that down too much, then suddenly it's in a position where it's like a shaman or a druid, but we don't even see a druid at the moment on 2100 plus. So Resto Druid getting like a little bit of a buff, I think definitely is something that needs to be considered as far as bumping up their representation. But when we look at like across the melee board, it's getting a lot closer. It's getting a lot closer. Something like Outlaw Rogue could maybe use a little bit of a tune-up, a little bit of adjustments here. Demon Hunter, a little bit of tune-up, a little bit of adjustments. Frost Death Knight as well. Enhanced Shaman feels a lot better. I feel like in 11.0.5, enhancement's really going to start to pick up with the rework that they're being applied to it. I'll have a link to that video at the end of this one if you guys want to check that out. Seems like Arms Warrior, it's holding decently strong on the ladder front, but when we get into tournaments, dealing with like the mobility and the kiting that a lot of the classes have, like Frost Mage and Marksmanship Hunter, Warrior starts to become a bit tougher in order to like kind of stick to your target. And also with Warlock specs, you know, Affliction is so highly represented at 37, but I've seen Destruction doing well. So this might just be like a funneling thing where everyone believes that this is the best. But I also think Affliction has been designed in a way that's just incredibly fun. So I love the Haunt play style be returning, and then the Shadow Bolt procs off of that. I think that's really fun. So a little bit of overrepresentation here for some specs that even Disc Priest to some extent, right? It's just really fun to play. I don't think it's terribly the end of the world. That's why I say I think this is one of those cases where you buff the weak up a bit as opposed to tune the top down too hard in this situation, because I think it's hitting the mark really good so far. I'm thoroughly pleased with how the War Within has gone so far. Couple of tweaks towards the MMR is definitely going to improve it. Couple of buffs to the underperforming specializations is definitely going to improve it. But I love the addition of Battleground Blitz. I've been enjoying my time on pretty much everything that I've been playing, other than maybe Farseer Shaman. I'm going to have to try Totemic. If you want to follow that live, I'll have my stream linked in the description down below. But I just wanted to give you guys a quick little update and my thoughts on how things are going with the PvP season after the AWC has concluded. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And aside from that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.